In terms of the Refugee Act, you're supposed to go to the nearest country. South Africa is not the nearest country to all those countries, even those Ethiopians and Somalians who claim to be running away from their countries. You are not supposed to just run to South Africa.
If South Africans really owned the land, like meaning they had real control, real enforcement power, real sovereignty, although we're not going to touch that subject right now, illegal immigration wouldn't be this chaotic free for all that we're pretending not to notice. Because land ownership is not just title deeds and farms, it's borders, minerals, airspace, ports, policing, and the ability to say no when the world tries to walk all over you. Right now, we don't own anything in practice. We're custodians on paper, tenants in spirit, and pawns in somebody else's geopolitical chessboard. Okay, right now I'm going to need you to lock in for a couple of minutes so that we can have this meeting right now, please. First of all, let's talk about national security. We can't talk about illegal immigration without talking about the collapse of basic state capacity. When borders are porous, the entire country becomes a waiting room for people fleeing dysfunction elsewhere. And I get it, the world is burning in many places. But when South Africans can't get documents, they can't get jobs, they can't police everyday crime, and can't get homes, while people entering illegally get processed faster than locals, that is a national security problem, not a humanitarian conversation anymore. A country without control is not a country. It is an open field. Second, becoming pawns in geopolitical theater. Look at what just happened with that Palestinian flight landing in South Africa without warning, right? There was no communication, no clearance, no diplomatic protocol. A plane, which is full of people from a war zone, lands here unannounced, and suddenly they're getting processed with refugee paperwork as if we're running an express lane at Home Affairs all of a sudden. I'm not blaming the people on the plane. They are possibly fleeing hell, but I'm talking about leadership. Because you can't be a sovereign state when foreign conflicts can spill into your territory uninvited. That's how weaker states get used as staging grounds, as bargaining chips, and as safe zones in other people's wars. Third, displacement of South Africans. We pretend that this is not happening, but it is. When the labor market is flooded with undocumented workers willing to work for less because they have no choice, South Africans, especially the poor people, get pushed out. When illegal mining syndicates take over abandoned mines, communities around them become war zones. And when foreign criminal networks operate freely because the SAPS is overrun and borders are open, ordinary South Africans pay the price for that. Displacement is not just physical, but it's economic as well. It's generational. We know this. We've seen it. We've felt it. We've experienced it. Fourth, there's the mining crisis. We look insane on the global stage. With illegal miners, many undocumented, they are dying regularly underground from explosions, collapses, toxic fumes, and suddenly South Africa is trending internationally because dozens of people died in a mine they were never supposed to be in, extracting minerals that do not belong to them under the nose of a government that can't enforce a single statute. Meanwhile, legal mining, which actually generates tax revenue, jobs, and safety standards, suffers. Investors look at us and see chaos, not opportunity. That's what happens when land is not secured. Criminals become the de facto owners. Fifth is criminal infiltration. Illegal immigration is not just about desperate people looking for a better life. It is mostly about cartels, syndicates, fugitives, terrorists, arms traffickers, and people with no papers and no traceable identity blending into a broken system. When Home Affairs is fragile, SAPS is overwhelmed, and intelligence structures are politically compromised, the country turns into a hiding place for people running from justice in their own states. South Africans become collateral damage. And is that what we want? No. Sixth is policy manipulation from the outside. Once the world knows that your borders are weak and your institutions are softer than mashed potatoes, humanitarian rhetoric becomes a tool. Other governments start pressurizing you to take more refugees, host this group, absorb this crisis. It sounds noble, but it's geopolitical strategy. Strong nations export their problems and weaker nations import them. We see what America did with Swaziland. Literally, what happens to the criminals if they happen to flee? Don't they end up in South Africa? or maybe I'm just tripping. Maybe somehow they will teleport back to the USA or back to their countries. Somehow. And then seventh, the emotional blackmail. South Africans get guilt tripped every time when they raise legitimate concerns. You're so xenophobic. You're so un-African. You're so heartless. Meanwhile, homegrown citizens are sleeping under bridges while foreign nationals bypass the system entirely. It doesn't make you a bad person to demand functional borders. It makes you a responsible citizen with love for your country. And if South Africans truly own the land, collectively, politically, and economically, none of this would fly. Planes would not land unannounced. Mines would not be crime zones. Borders would not be walkthroughs. Criminals wouldn't treat the country like a storage unit. Geopolitical players wouldn't use us as a soft landing spot. And poor South Africans wouldn't be abandoned in their own country. In this case, ownership is not sentiment, ownership is enforcement. And until South Africans get serious about whose land this actually is, the country will remain a playground for outside forces, for illegal networks, and opportunists who knows that the state is too weak and too distracted or too compromised to act. And that is the real story. And there's just one more thing I want to touch on concerning the G20 summit that I haven't spoken on yet from my previous videos. While South Africans argue on TikTok and on Twitter comments, the G20 is busy carving up influence over our land, borders, data, and mineral flows through a network of task teams. The Development and Infrastructure Group will probably decide which countries get agricultural funding, and foreign corporations swoop in where local ownership is weak, right? The Trade and Investment Task Force will probably negotiate deals that favor nations with firm land control, which we don't have. The Migration and Labor Mobility Group is probably designing international refugee handling frameworks that will quietly keep pressuring countries like South Africa to absorb more displacement from other lands. The Energy and Mineral Resources Panel will probably be shaping mining policies, and when our mines look lawless, foreign actors find ways to use that chaos as a reason to intervene or dictate whatever terms they want. The Digital Economy Task Team will probably push global digital IDs, land registry tech, and AI systems. And if South Africans don't own the land, whoever controls the databases controls the country. It's simple. In the 21st century, sovereignty isn't just about borders and minerals, but data too. Our signals, our communication networks, our satellite infrastructure, our national information backbone. That is why I'm side-eyeing the whole Starlink entry into South Africa's situation, because the pattern here is clear. They want full access to the user base. They want full extraction of national data and zero meaningful collaboration with South African institutions. Not infrastructure partnerships, not regulatory transparency, not shared stakes, just profit flowing one way and national dependency flowing the other way. And we're not naive. We all know the Musk family has historical ties. We all know the narratives getting pushed about Afrikaner persecution. And we all know how propaganda can get manufactured and to destabilize a country right before foreign players swoop in to dominate a sector. That psychology is no longer subtle and it doesn't work anymore. It's old playbook geopolitics that we are not falling for. And Elon, let's be honest about this. If your satellites sit above us, your servers sit outside our jurisdiction, and your company holds the metadata of millions of South Africans, then you own more of the country than most citizens do. You can shape perception. You can shape narrative. You can shape economic behavior. And you can do it without ever showing up to a parliamentary hearing or complying with a single localization requirement. Ain't that grand? That is essentially a digital version of the same control South Africans fought against during apartheid. Unaccountable power from external authority. So no, we do not have amnesia this time, not after a generation of people who died trying to break free from a state that controlled identity documents, movement, information, surveillance, and public narrative. Because giving that kind of power to a foreign tech empire, one that already refuses to cooperate with state law, it is a fast track to a new form of apartheid, just upgraded, encrypted, and branded as innovation. Real sovereignty starts with citizens who understand that land is not just soil, it's leverage. You own it, you dictate the rules. You don't own it, you become the pawn. South Africans need to take land seriously, not for symbolism, but for survival. Because ownership is stability, ownership is protection, ownership is the line between being a nation and being a cautionary tale.